There's growing sentiment that 2024 will be the end, with Donald Trump calling it the final battle against enemies in Washington, with Roseanne Barr saying there won't be an election. Whether that means we won't actually go cast ballots because there will be some war declaration suspending elections, or because whatever we call the election, it won't be legitimate. Say Trump's name is removed from the ballot. Stephen Marsh is the author of the book, The Next Civil War. We had him on Timcast IRL, and it was a very interesting conversation because we agree on so much, looking at the conflict in the United States and fearing we may be headed towards civil war. Now, Stephen Marsh's view is that, he's more of a Democrat corporate media narrative type. He believes these stories. He lacks lots of information. And that was my main critique of him, that while you can assess the physical violence, the animosity, the rage, the anger, if your worldview is predicated upon lies from intelligence agencies and corporate media outlets that have no allegiance but to their sponsors and probably national security letters, you're going to be wrong about the greater facts of what's really happening. Ken Paxton, the AG of Texas, they recently tried to impeach him. We have this from the Post-Millennial. Paxton reveals to Tucker Carlson that Biden administration lawyers were part of his impeachment investigation in Texas. And why? Ken Paxton filed, famously, Texas v. Pennsylvania, a lawsuit in 2020 that sought to stop the counting of electoral votes from certain states due to what he viewed as unconstitutional changes to voting law. In an interview with Tucker Carlson, he said, quote, they needed to figure out how many real votes there were so they could figure out how many mail-in ballots to apply to the election. It was definitely planned. This is the Attorney General of Texas outright saying 2020's election was a fraud. The Supreme Court refused to take the case of Texas v. Pennsylvania, with only Justices Thomas and Alito saying it is their duty to hear cases under what's called original jurisdiction. And this is where we are. 2024 may be the last election, and for a lot of reasons. 2020 may have been the last election, depending on how you look at it. When Roseanne and Michael Malice came on Timcast IRL, Roseanne made a bunch of bold predictions. One, that there would be military tribunals. And I really don't think that's going to happen. That's like a weird buzzword, because a tribunal is like 3 military officers, criminally charging and presiding over criminal cases or seditious conspiracy cases or things like that. Yeah, it's not happening. But there won't be an election. Michael Malice made a wager with her. But I asked, now, do you mean like we literally will just not have an election? Like they're going to say, no, Joe Biden's president again. Have a nice day. Or do you mean we'll go out and vote, but it will be illegitimate? It's hard to know for sure. I think she kind of meant that we wouldn't vote, but I don't know. She said that could be it. And that's a fair point. But if that's the case, 2020 may have been the last election, depending on what your views are, because of the way the rules were changed. I am no fan of the narrative that there were ballots printed in China and buses, trucks coming in, depositing ballots and whatever. I mean, maybe, sure, fine, whatever, because we did see a bunch of crazy and weird videos. But I do just generally think Democrats, and this is definitive fact, changed the rules in many states, which gave them insane advantages in ballot harvesting, ballot chasing, etc. And so perhaps Ken Paxton is right. They needed to figure out how many mail-in votes they needed, but they had them. And that's the issue. Now, of course, the argument is these mail-in votes are not legitimate because they were going to nursing homes and getting people just to sign over stewardship or whatever to ballot chasers. These are still human beings who have the right to vote, who told people, vote for me. Now, of course, I know it's unjust. It's unfair. It's not a legitimate election, but it's not fraudulent ballots. It's the rules were changed to benefit Democrats. That is to say, manipulating the legal process for gain. And that's always how elections have been done. It's just getting more and more egregious to the point where it's not a real election. I mean, look, it's one thing to say we're going to discount these votes, we're going to count these votes, we're going to remove these people from the voter rolls and have arguments about whether or not that's fair and legitimate. But when executive branches of states, in violation of the Constitution, change the rules to allow them to collect ballots from individuals who probably wouldn't have voted, now we're talking about stepping over the line. Thus, you have two principal camps as it pertains to 2020. You have the fraudster narrative where people are like Chinese ballots and Venezuelan servers, and that was always nuts. And then you have the general, more popular view of what a rigged election is. And this is to say that Democrats changed the rules. Texas tried to stop them. Texas was unable to do so. So here's the statement from Donald Trump as of yesterday. Former President Donald Trump declared 2024 the final battle against an array of forces ailing the U.S. Doubling down on a previous pronouncement, Trump raised the rhetorical stakes to the highest degree possible, going so far as to declare that a defeat in 2024 would mean the end of the country. The 2024 presidential election will be nothing less than the final battle for the U.S., Trump told his audience at a campaign event in Iowa. The former president declared that 2024 is our final battle. With you at my side, we will demolish the deep state. We will expel the warmongers from our government. They want to go to war with everybody. We will drive out the globalists. We will cast out the communist Marxists and fascists. And we will throw off the sick political class that truly hates our country. We will rout the fake news media. We will defeat crooked Joe Biden. And we will end illegal immigration once and for all, just as we had it 3 years ago. The great silent majority is rising like never before, he continued. And under our leadership, the forgotten men and women will be forgotten no longer. With your help, your love, and your vote, we will put America first, and we will make America great again, greater than ever before. Now, that message may resonate for a lot of you. Many of you are saying we must stop the deep state, but there's an inverse message happening on the other side. Stephen Marsh writes for The Guardian, here's the scary way Trump could win without the electoral or popular vote. In a contingent election, he could lose the popular vote, electoral college, and all his legal cases and still end up the legal U.S. president. Marsh recently published a book called The Last Election. That's their view. It's quite interesting. But I want to talk to you about Texas v. Pennsylvania to explain to you why he may be right. Again, I don't agree with his perspective because he lacks a lot of information. I am not saying that to be mean to him. I think he's a very smart guy, and we agree on the surface level things that we're seeing with conflict and crisis between political factions, a refusal to back down, all of this stuff we talk about. And surface level news is really easy to understand. But when you dive into the deep and the esoteric, such as the Burisma scandal with Joe Biden, which is now, I would say, provable beyond a reasonable doubt to an average person. Stephen Marsh is unfamiliar with this. So the perspective I have is that Joe Biden is deeply corrupt. The Democrats and the Republicans in the Uniparty are extracting and exploiting the U.S. system for personal gain, either through trading stocks or sending money overseas to war to fund the war machine. Because probably stocks, to be completely honest. If they can predict war and they can predict spending $100-200 billion on weapons, well, guess what? The military industrial complex is going to turn a pretty profit from that. You can make accurate bets, whether it be put options or long calls or say short and long. I don't know. I'm not a finance guy. You can bet on the long-term future or short-term losses, whatever. You know how it's going to play out. It's an extraction of wealth. People like Pelosi, McConnell, Biden, they don't care about you. They don't care about the future of this country. They refuse. They cling to power. They won't give it up. They don't care about what young people are going through. They don't care about what millennials are going through. They care about not losing their power. And this is where we are today. Let me play for you this clip from Ken Paxton so you can understand just how dire the situation is as it pertains to 2024. Oh, sorry. I always do this. You guys, and all of you knew it was coming, that I was going to have the audio set properly.
Stopped counting votes on election night?
Because what they needed to figure out was how many real votes there were so they could figure out how many mail-in ballots to apply to the election. That's what they would have done in Texas. I'm convinced.
So you think that was fraud, right?
I have no doubt, having been through that whole process.
It wasn't just a water leak?
It was definitely planned. I mean, it would have happened in Texas. I promise you.
But can you just stop counting ballots on election night when everyone's watching TV? Oh, I know.
Have you ever seen that before, ever? For 3 years?
Well, you tell me. You're the one you're in politics.
I've never seen it before in my life. I was like, I knew it when they stopped. And Trump is leading in all these states. I knew exactly what they were doing. Because there's no way to know where those mail-in ballots came. Anybody could have filled them out. Anybody. There's no way to know where those ballots came from.
That's not a dangerous conspiracy theory?
I watched it happen. I was a part.
All right. So let's say it's a conspiracy theory. Let's say to all the liberal individuals who catch this clip, which is probably not that many, but for those that do and don't believe the fraud narrative, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I do think it's kind of BS they stopped counting. All of that stuff is highly suspect, but I believe Ken Paxton says we don't know where those ballots came from. Yeah, I think that they had ballot harvesters and ballot chasers going out, collecting signatures and mail-in votes, and the laws were changed to allow them to do it. In many of these states, it was legal to do. And so they knew that they had these stacks lying around somewhere. But he makes an interesting point. Now, I can't speak too much to his view on this. I'm not going to get conspiratorial. I don't need to. For the liberal viewers, you need to understand only one thing. Ken Paxton, the AG of Texas, believes it. Have a nice day. It doesn't matter if he's right, doesn't matter if he's wrong in the greater context. And I say this all the time as it pertains to conflict in this country. It doesn't matter if you think Antifa is factually wrong. It doesn't matter if you think the Proud Boys are factually wrong. What matters is they believe it. Now, it's really funny that they push the grifter narrative, that they don't actually believe it. They're just saying, yeah, okay, dude. Yeah, going out and fighting in the street, they certainly believe what they're saying. And you need only understand the beliefs of an individual to predict what may happen in the future. That is to say, if someone tells me that they believe their neighbor is a criminal and they're wrong about it, don't be surprised if they start surveilling their neighbor's activities, calling the police on them. You can predict the behavior based on the beliefs of the individual. If Ken Paxton believes there was fraud, what do you think Ken Paxton will do in the 2024 election? I bring you back in time. Many of you may not be aware of this. This is several years ago now. December 11th, 2020, 3 years almost. How many of you are younger and only just entering the political space and this culture war? It's really interesting that we have guests. It's just, look, I know all of you older folks really understand this because you've been through it already. But for me, it's 37. We have people on Timcast IRL who are like 15 years old when we were talking about the Battle of Berkeley. When I went to Sweden 6 years ago, you have people who are like 17 or 18 and not really paying attention to politics. And they've now been on this show talking about their body of work politically. Right now, we are going to start seeing new people, and it happens every election cycle, of course, young people entering the voting block who will vote. It's not in great numbers, but enough of them who are saying, what is this? I don't know what happened 3 years ago. Someone who is 20 years old today did not vote in the 2020 election. Well, depending on what their birthday was. I know. Texas v. Pennsylvania and the relevance of Ken Paxton. Let me remind you. Texas v. Pennsylvania was a lawsuit filed at the United States Supreme Court contesting the administration of the 2020 presidential election in certain states in which Joe Biden defeated incumbent Donald Trump. Filed by Texas State Attorney General Ken Paxton on December 8th, 2020. Under the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction, Texas v. Pennsylvania alleged that Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin violated the U.S. Constitution by changing election procedures through non-legislative means, thus violating the independent state legislature theory. The suit sought to temporarily withhold the certified vote count from these 4 states prior to the Electoral College vote count on December 14th. The suit was filed after about 90 lawsuits arising from disputes over the election results filed by Trump and the Republican Party had failed. The suit had been drafted by a team of lawyers with ties to the Trump presidential campaign. Paxton agreed to file the case after other state attorneys general declined to do so. The Solicitor General of Texas, Kyle D. Hawkins, objected to the suit and refused to let his name be added. Paxton hired Lawrence J. Joseph, who had helped draft the suit, and special counsel to assist with the suit. Within 1 day of Texas's filing, Trump, over 100 Republican representatives, and 18 Republican state attorneys general filed motions to support the case. Trump referred to this case as the big one of the election-challenging lawsuits. Attorneys general for the defendant states joined in briefs submitted by their counterparts from 20 other states, 2 territories, and D.C., urged the court to refuse the case. This is amazing. Attorneys general for the defendant states joined in briefs submitted by their counterparts from 20 other states, urged the court to refuse. Legal experts argued the case was not likely to be heard and not likely to succeed if it did get heard, and that it was thus a Hail Mary action. The Supreme Court issued orders on December 11th declining to hear the case on the basis that Texas lacked standing under Article 3 of the Constitution to challenge the results of elections held by another state. This is one of the most consequential cases in the history of this country. And I believe the Supreme Court hit the nail into the coffin, perhaps not the final, but a nail into the coffin of the United States, or at least the current iteration of where we are at. Something may change. And I'll break it down for you as such. The Constitution, the independent state legislature theory, the Constitution says it. The Constitution says that elections shall be held in accordance with the procedures that the legislature determines. Thus, it is a fact. It's a fact that several executive branches altered the voting rules. They say the suit was filed in 90 lawsuits, yada, yada, yada. Do they have that in here? Yes. It argued that these states violated the U.S. Constitution by changing election procedures through non-legislative means. It is a fact that that occurred. Judges and governors changed the rules, but the Constitution says the legislature must determine. The Supreme Court refused to hear the case. Only 2 justices said that we should, and that was Thomas and Alito. You ultimately had, I believe it was 48 states challenging each other. Of course, the Democrats were saying, no, you can't do this. We won. The Republicans were saying, you changed the rules. And I think any reasonable person, if asked, would say Texas is correct. What was Texas's argument? Why they had standing? Texas is a participant in a 50-state election. The president is chosen by states, not by the popular vote. The states are all submitting their electoral votes based on the elections they hold in accordance with their state legislatures, as per the Constitution. If the rules were changed in 4 states or more outside of the Constitution's authority, then Texas's votes are being undermined. To put it simply, if we are all getting together inside, let's say you know all your roommates, we're all going to vote on what we're going to have for lunch. And you say the rules are as such. Only you can make the decision, and it's got to be that you make a certain amount of money that you're submitting. And here are the rules that we all agree upon as to what counts as a vote. And the vote is you're putting money in the pot, right? I put in $5 towards lunch. I get a vote. Well, all of a sudden, 4 other individuals start compromising about where they're going to get their money from. One guy says, hey, lend me some extra money so I can make a vote. You go, whoa, hold on. That's not fair. You know, what we're voting on is I work, I have money, I pay. If someone's giving him money, hey, that changes the way these votes are happening. And now they're getting extra votes. The votes are being changed. It's basically erasing my vote. It's unfair. Simply put, if Texas abides by the Constitution and casts its votes in good faith, and these 4 states undermine the will of their own people, these votes are not the same. The system is damaged. I agree. You are not having a legitimate vote based on the popular vote count of these states if governors and judges change the rules and the people aren't voting properly. Now you have executives who are voting on behalf of their state, not the legislatures, undermining your vote. Or how about this? The individual's parents tell them you have to vote for this, and they say, okay, fine, for some extraneous reason. And you're like, no, this is about us and our roommates, not an outside force telling them how they should be spending their money. It's not fair. And the Supreme Court refused to hear it. And for that, it seems to me that we are headed for a crisis and a disaster in 2024, because now the Constitution has been smashed, shattered, ripped to shreds. The Supreme Court should have taken the case, and they could have ruled against Texas. The refusal to hear a case citing original jurisdiction. I am not saying the Supreme Court should have overturned the election. I am not saying they should have pushed a contingent election where Trump certainly would have won. I am saying the Supreme Court should have said, if Texas has a complaint, we hear it. And then the Supreme Court could have said one of 2 things. We agree or disagree. The Supreme Court could have said, we view that the changes made in these states are sound and legitimate, and that the legislature can pass laws, but currently the system allows for governors to make these changes under laws passed by these legislatures, in which case you can't undermine the decision of these states. And then Texas would have lost, but we would have had the argument played out. Instead, what happened in 2020? Of all of these lawsuits that were filed, including Texas v. Pennsylvania, they were almost entirely dismissed on standing, which is a BS way of saying we're not going to bother with it. Standing is the idea that you are not an aggrieved party. So if, let's say I go to McDonald's and I order food and the food's bad and it makes me really sick and I say, I'm suing. And then someone sitting at a different table says, I'm suing too. The judge will say, you have no party in this lawsuit. You weren't aggrieved by this action. You're not a defendant or a plaintiff. Get out of here. Case dismissed. You can't sue someone else for death. You can't, person A can't sue person B because person B defamed person C. It's only actions between persons B and C. However, that is a ridiculous argument. Ridiculous. Texas, of course, is an aggrieved party. We're all part of this election, says Texas. We are one of the people in the election. The rules were changed in those states, undermining our position. Fact. How do we know those votes are real if the states violated the Constitution? It is garbage and BS for the Supreme Court or for anyone to say, you don't have an argument about the internal workings of other states. They submitted it. Have a nice day. Okay. So I'll put it this way. For what purpose should I participate in an election where we all agree, me and my 5 roommates all agree, it will only be that we decide as roommates what we order for lunch together. And then one day, 2 of my roommates' parents come in and say, nope, this is what the food we want you to go and submit. You're having salad. And I say, no. Why am I bothering to pool my resources together when these people are interfering, right? Why would I? I say, I don't participate anymore. It was supposed to be what my roommates and I wanted to eat, not what you wanted. It's supposed to be elections based on what the state legislatures say and not the executives or the judges. And yet, that's what happened. Here's my fear. Maybe 2024 is the last election. Maybe 2020 was the last election. For what reason would a state like Texas or anyone else want to participate in which they know other states are in violation of the Constitution? Or how about this? If Texas feels, to a large degree, either through the public, the AG, the governorship, whatever, if there is mass sentiment, or just greater than 50%, that they are not participating in a legitimate election, why would they? Why would they adhere to it? And this is a recipe for disaster. Texas v. Pennsylvania was never resolved. None of these lawsuits were, for the most part, in which case, why would anyone legitimately participate? Now, of course, my view is this. The actions that must be taken now by everyone is to start the legal procedures to do everything you need to do to get the votes you need for your candidate. I mean, Democrats are already doing it. Republicans better step up. 2024, it could be the last election, or it could be that 2020 already was. I don't know. The AG of Texas believes it was fraud, believes they cheated. Do you think that Ken Paxton this time around is going to sit around and do nothing? They tried to impeach him, and they failed. And that's the big story from the post-millennial. Biden administration lawyers were part of his impeachment. Why? Of course. Because Texas challenged the unconstitutional actions of these states. It's a scary reality of what this means. I don't think people really understand how insane 2024 will be. If you went back to 2020 and you said that January 6th would happen, people wouldn't believe you. Because even on the day of, no one thought it was going to happen. No one thought there would be a breaching of the Capitol. Can you imagine what's going to happen next year? And you think look, do you think there will be less than a January 6th? I'm scared of this. I am worried. I don't know where it goes. I can tell you, Ken Paxton as AG of Texas going on Tucker Carlson's show to the tune of millions of viewers and saying outright that 2020 was a fraud. Wow. What does this mean for the next election? It's a fact. No one will accept the results. And I don't think that's in dispute, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. Democrats, you think that if Trump loses, he'll simply say, I lost? He didn't do it last time. Republicans, are you really going to believe that Joe Biden won again, or Gavin Newsom, whoever it ends up being? I think it'll be Gavin Newsom, but we'll see. Do you really think that it would be legitimate? If Republicans right now overwhelmingly believe 2020 was stolen and Ken Paxton says it was fraud, why would they accept a Democrat winning again? And if Democrats know Donald Trump rejected 2020, why would he accept 2024? Neither will accept it. More importantly, too, because I am forgetting the other here. Democrats didn't accept 2016. They accused Trump of being a Russian spy. Why would they accept it if Trump won? Of course they won't. But I don't know what this means. I can just tell you that, it's probably fair to say 2020 was the last election. And you know what? Based on your view, if you do think it was a fraud, then 2016 was. Because if you think 2020 wasn't legit, I think it might be fair to say, and I got to be honest, 2012 may have been the last election in this country. Not that they're not dirty, and they're always dirty. But 2016 was viewed by the Democrats as fraudulent with Russian interference. Thus, that wasn't a legitimate election. They said Trump was illegitimate. 2020 is viewed by Republicans as a fraud, thus not legitimate. So if 2016 and 2020 weren't legitimate, when was the last election? 2012. And if 2024 is not going to be legitimate, how could it be considering 2016 and 2020? The last election was 11 years ago. It makes you think, it makes you wonder. I don't know what to tell you, my friends. But you look at the accusations that are being levied against Giuliani, against Tim Ballard, against Russell Brand. It is going to get balls to the walls weird out there. And I hope you're thinking about this. I don't know what it means you should do. I think everybody should get as active as possible in knocking on doors, registering voters, building culture, making sure you're safe, learning a little bit of survival stuff. At least download some survival apps on your phone. And that is to assume that if whatever ends up happening, there's electricity. I assume there will be. Let's be real. It could just get really crazy. And whatever ends up happening, 2024 will not be the end. It'll be the beginning. 2024's election will have disastrous consequences no matter who wins. That's it. End of story. It was a disaster that they attacked the president and engaged in a seditious conspiracy to undermine the executive branch when Trump won. It's a disaster that the people don't believe the election of 2020 was legitimate. This country has no confidence. So what do you think 2024 has in store? And I got to be honest, it's not even 2024 that I'm truly worried about. It's 2025. So we'll see. I suppose I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.